It was a crisp November morning when Nora hurried out of the cafe, gripping her steaming coffee in one hand and her car keys in the other. She was running late again. Her boss had already warned her twice this week, and she could practically feel the weight of another lecture waiting for her. But just as she reached her car, something unusual caught her eye: a wrinkled piece of paper tucked beneath the windshield wiper. At first, she assumed it was another parking ticket or some random flyer. With an irritated sigh, she pulled it free, ready to toss it away, until she noticed the shaky handwriting, written with what looked like the last drops of ink from a dying pen. "I'm sorry for what I did. I hope one day you can forgive me. The man who took from you." Nora froze. Her heartbeat slowed as confusion and unease settled in. "Took from me?" she thought. "What does that even mean?" She looked around, scanning the quiet, windswept street, but there was no one in sight, only the soft rustle of autumn leaves scraping along the pavement. She folded the note, slipped it into her pocket, and drove off. But the words refused to leave her mind. All day she was distracted. The message looped in her thoughts, its mystery gnawing at her. That evening, curiosity got the better of her. She returned to the cafe and asked the barista if she'd seen anyone suspicious. The girl behind the counter frowned for a moment, then nodded. "There's a homeless man who sits out by the bench sometimes," she said softly. "He doesn't bother anyone. Just sits there, like he's waiting for something. Or someone." The next morning, Nora arrived earlier than usual. She parked across the street and scanned the sidewalk until she spotted him. A frail, weary-looking man in a tattered brown jacket, clutching a faded backpack to his chest. His face was weathered, his eyes sunken, but something in them made her stop. It wasn't guilt, it wasn't shame, it was pain. Quiet, raw pain. Taking a deep breath, Nora walked toward him. "Excuse me," she said gently, holding up the note. "Did you leave this on my car?" The man looked up, startled. For a long moment he said nothing, then nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." That was me. Nora's fingers tightened around the paper. "Why?" she asked softly. "What did you take from me?" The man looked down, his rough hands trembling. "It was years ago," he said, voice rough and fragile. "I broke into your car while it was parked outside the hospital. I thought I'd find food, maybe money. But it wasn't that. It was your son's things." Nora's breath hitched. "My son's things," she whispered. "How do you—" "I didn't know," he interrupted quickly, tears already gathering in his eyes. "Not until I opened the bag that night. There was a tiny blue blanket, a teddy bear, and a photo of you holding a baby. I realized what I'd done. I wanted to return it, but when I went back, you were gone. I kept that blanket. It was the only thing that reminded me I was still human." Her world tilted. She sank onto the nearby bench, her voice barely audible. "My son died that night," she said, tears filling her eyes. "I was at the hospital to say goodbye." Those were the only memories I had left. The man's face crumpled. He covered his mouth, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I've carried that guilt every day. I didn't even know your name, but I prayed you'd forgive me somehow." For a moment, anger flashed through Nora, but it faded just as quickly, replaced by something deeper: sorrow, empathy, a quiet ache. She looked at him, this trembling, broken man, and didn't see a thief anymore. She saw a soul drowning in regret. "Do you still have the blanket?" she asked softly. He nodded, reaching into his backpack. From inside, he carefully pulled out a worn blue baby blanket, neatly folded despite its age. Nora reached out, her hands trembling, and brushed her fingers over the fabric. It was softer than she remembered. Her tears fell freely now. "You kept it safe," she whispered. "I didn't deserve to," he said, his voice shaking. For a while they said nothing. Two strangers sat side by side, bound by a pain they had never shared until that moment. Nora could have turned away, called the police, or cursed him for what he'd done. But instead, she lowered herself onto the cold pavement beside him. "What's your name?" she asked quietly. The man hesitated as if searching through years of silence for the right answer. "Daniel," he said finally. "Daniel Brooks." Nora managed a weak smile. "I'm Nora." He nodded slowly, his voice breaking. "You must hate me." She shook her head. "No," she said softly. "I think maybe you were meant to find that blanket. Maybe you were meant to protect it until I was ready to let it go." Daniel's trembling hands clutched the faded blue blanket as he looked at Nora. The world outside kept moving, cars rushing by, strangers lost in their own worlds. Yet for those few moments, time seemed to pause. Two broken hearts sat side by side, connected not by destiny or blood, but by pain and redemption. Nora wiped her tears and whispered, her voice shaking, "You said you've kept it for years. Why didn't you ever let it go?" Daniel stared at the worn fabric, his eyes clouded with memories. "Because it was the only thing that made me feel human," he said, his voice cracking. "Every night I wrapped it around me and prayed, not for myself, but for that child and for you. I thought, maybe if I kept it safe, God would forgive me." His words broke into quiet sobs. Nora's heart ached. The pain in his voice mirrored her own. She reached across the small distance between them, gently resting her hand over his. "You've already been forgiven," she whispered. "You did it every night you prayed for someone you didn't even know." Daniel looked up, disbelief trembling in his weary eyes. "You mean that?" he asked softly. Nora nodded, her tears glistening in the fading light. "Yes. Because maybe God was never punishing us. Maybe he was using both of us. You to protect what I couldn't bear to face, and me to remind you that kindness still lives inside you." Daniel lowered his head, shoulders shaking as years of guilt began to melt away. "I don't deserve this," he murmured. Nora smiled faintly through her tears. "None of us really do," she said. "That's what makes it grace." Silence followed. Not empty, but full. Nora looked at the blanket again. Once a symbol of unbearable pain, now a quiet reminder of healing. The ache was still there, but softer now, like an old scar that no longer bled. She folded the blanket carefully and handed it back to him. "Keep it," she said gently. "It's safe with you. My son doesn't need it anymore. But maybe you do." Daniel shook his head. "No, I can't. This belongs to you." Nora smiled sadly. "It belongs to both of us now. It's not just a blanket, it's a story about forgiveness. Every time you hold it, remember that you're still capable of love." Daniel pressed the blanket to his chest, sobbing softly. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," Nora replied. "Just promise me one thing. Live again. Go somewhere new. Let the past rest." He nodded, and for the first time, his eyes carried a spark of light. Faint, but real. A week later, when Nora returned to the cafe, the bench was empty. Only a single envelope lay there, her name written in trembling letters. Her heart raced as she opened it. Inside was a short note and a photograph. The note read, "Thank you for seeing the man beneath the mistakes. I left the city like you said. I'm working at a shelter now, helping people who remind me of who I was. You gave me back my life, Nora, and I'll spend the rest of it earning your kindness." Nora looked at the photograph. Daniel standing outside a shelter, smiling, holding that same blue blanket neatly folded in his arms. Her tears came in waves, but they were no longer bitter. They were pure, cleansing. She pressed the photo to her chest and whispered, "Goodbye, Daniel. And thank you for holding a piece of my heart until I was ready to feel again." That night, driving home, Nora turned off the radio and let the silence fill the car. It wasn't lonely anymore. It felt peaceful. When she reached her house, she found a small package on her porch. Inside was a new white baby blanket and a note. For the next child who needs to feel love. From someone who finally understands what it means to give. Nora sat on the porch steps, clutching the soft fabric, and cried. Not from sorrow, but from grace. The sky shimmered with stars as if heaven itself was listening. She looked up and whispered, "You did it, Daniel. You found your way home." And in that quiet, sacred moment, Nora realized something she'd been searching for all along. Sometimes the ones who break us are the ones sent to help us heal. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it transforms it into light. That night, for the first time in forever, Nora fell asleep without the weight of yesterday pressing on her chest.